Welcome to Stats. We're going to be looking at two-way tables here. And basically, two-way table just simply means we can take multiple categories and put them into the same table, and it gives us the ability to kind of compare those things. Marginal distributions are a single piece. It's one category, if you will. A lot of times this is, I have a table I'm going to look at, and I'll show you some of the marginal values off that table. But essentially what it comes down to is just looking at a single aspect of the table instead of multiple aspects at a time. Compared to conditional probabilities, which means that we are looking at, not probabilities, distributions, conditional distributions, which means that we are looking at the comparison between two variables within that system that we're dealing with. Okay, so what I did was I collected some information here about graduation rates or degrees conferred upon people based on gender. This is from NCES.gov. Okay, so this is pretty solid data. This is from 2018 to 2019, the data that we're looking at. And the numbers were what were first initially listed there, and I just have male and female listed. And then I also need the totals, and I'll explain why I got the totals there in a second. But what I did is I just copied over those four groups, and when I say those four groups, and let me just kind of move this over a little bit to make it look prettier, we have associate's degree, bachelor's degree, master's degree, professional or doctoral degrees, and then the totals, and I don't have the totals figured in there yet, so I thought I'd do that in front of you and show you. I just said equals and the sum, open parentheses, and then I can just grab all those values and enter, and then do the same thing. I can do control copy and just post that right there, and then I can do the same thing with this one right here, copy that down. So that gives us the total degrees that were conferred in that 2018-2019 time period. Now what I did down here and below that was I figured out the percentages, and let me show you why I did that process here in a second. So I'm just going to go through, I'm going to hit escape to unselect that box right there. I'm going to go through and I'm going to select all those cells right there. I'm going to go to insert, and then I'm going to go to do columns, and you can do some of these other fancier ones if you prefer, but I'm just going to grab this second right here that's just going to be stacked. All right, so I'm going to do that, and then there I go. So there's the values. Well, that's kind of weird looking, right? So what we're doing here when we look at this is we're looking at those four categories, actually five categories if you look at the total, and we're seeing how they match up with each other. So of course bachelor's degree are the most common degree that conferred, and there's the total over there. So maybe we don't want the total right now with this, because that's, if you look at our values, these are huge values, and then we say professional and doctoral degrees are right here, and that's a very, very small piece. We can't really see what's going on with that. So maybe we don't look at those particular values. Maybe we just look, instead of looking at the totals, we just look at the individual categories that we're concerned with right there. And I'm going to go back to insert, and this time I'm going to get the stacked one again. And so these are the counts that we're dealing with here. Okay, so that's a little bit easier to look at now. I'm just having the two categories in each one to look at. I don't have the totals. If I wanted to, maybe I could extend this out that way. Well, if he'll let me. There we go. And they'll add that one in there. And when we do that, you can see it resets everything, and that's still kind of hard to look at. So we can't necessarily include that one in there just because of the total values. They're offset all these others, and we really can't see what's going on. What is useful is that we can see that the comparison between the blue and the orange. The blue is the males who have those individual degrees, and the orange is the females who have those degrees. So what else can we do with this? Well, this is still, I would say, decently difficult to look at. So that's why I did this second piece down here when I looked at percentages. And this goes back to the idea of these conditional probabilities. We really want to be able to compare them and understand what's going on. So these are the total counts here, and we can obviously see, just if we wanted to understand what was going with the total counts for each set of degrees, we can see that fairly well just simply by looking at that total count for the bottom. Or if we just want to see the females versus males, and we just do a graph just of that. But when we look at comparing multiple ones, which is what we're doing here with these two-way tables, is we're trying to compare multiple categories at the same time. We might be a little bit easier to look at this if we're looking at percentages. So what I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to hit equals. I'm going to grab this cell right here and I'm going to divide by the total down there. And then I'm going to do the same thing in the cell below it. I didn't like that. Oh yeah. So we need to do equals this value divided by the total. There we go. So there's the totals. Now what I can do is I'm going to insert a row directly above this. And then I'm going to come up here and I'm just going to grab these values right here. Okay. And I'm going to paste them right here. Now, when I'm doing that, now what will happen is Excel will, or whatever this spreadsheet is, when I go to create my table, it'll automatically label this stuff for me. So I'm just going to make it a little bit nicer to look at. So I'm going to hit there, and there's my table now. So this is based upon percentages. And this is a lot easier to look at for a number of different reasons. I'll just put it right there so it's front and center. Is now we're based on everything being a total level of 1 when we look across the board here. Now the reason this is more useful is now we can compare group to group to group in a little bit better detail, because we're not looking, all the bars are the same height, and we're not having to guess like with the other one. With the professional degrees, when we look at this, that's a very, very small bar there, so it's kind of hard to tell what's really going on here. But when we look at this one, we can see that the professionals, which was the fewest number of degrees awarded, we can tell what the percentage is right there going across, and we can say it's pretty close to 50%, but what we're really looking at is 43 to 56. So when we look across the board, we can see that masters was the lowest, associates was the second lowest for percentage-wise for men. So we're not necessarily looking at the counts; we're just looking at the percentages of each degree that was awarded to males versus females. Now, why does this matter? Well, when economically speaking, this could be a pretty big deal, because if you still have a country where most of the households are relying upon the men to produce or bring in most of the money, then this might be an issue, because these blue boxes represent the smaller populations of people with these degrees, and these degrees or these jobs that people would hold these degrees with might be less dominated by the male profession. So this is a pretty good indicator that these upper echelon jobs, if you will, are actually overwhelmingly housed by women at this point, at least when you look at the degrees that are being awarded and moving in that direction. Does that mean that there's a lot of information that can be drawn out of that and dealt with? And this is not to knock one group or the other. It's just saying that's in American society, it's not necessarily the case anymore that the men is the head of the household and bringing in the greatest amount of money. Obviously, we're moving into a stage where that is no longer true within our society. And I'm not bashing one way or the other on that. It's just an observation looking at the data. And that's one of the things about when we look at data, is that we need to make sure that we're paying attention to the statistics and the numbers and what they're actually telling us, and not worrying so much about the social aspects or the social bias we may be bringing into it, because we're trying to understand what the data is telling us. And then we start making references and trying to understand it better. So there is that. And that is those big pieces for that in terms of what we're looking at. So once again, when you start looking at data, you want to look at a lot of different aspects of the data. How many different ways can we study this data and get a really good feel for what's going on? Maybe another piece we want to look at is averages and standard deviations. Like, what are the means for these different pieces? Is there a trend of some sort we can look at? Like, if we wanted to look at a trend, what would we need to do? Well, instead of looking at a total between a 2-year time period, maybe we want to look at individual years over a longer time period to look at a trend to see what's happening. The bachelor's degrees for men and women, are they both going up? Are they both going down? Is one going up and one going down? That would be a trend that we could look at by looking over the years, and we could even look at that in terms of percentages still, to see if that percentage between the two groups is changing from year to year. And we could even include that here, so we could even have two bars right next to each other. One is 2008 and 2018, one is 2019. So there's lots of different ways we can look at this data. So when you're looking at data, remember, always think about how many different ways can I look at this? How much different information can I pull out that will give me a better understanding of what is happening in this situation? All right, take care.